Hey everyone, thank you so much for tuning in to the Keep Birth Sacred podcast, where we honor the sacredness of the motherhood journey. In this space, we're changing the way women transition into motherhood, one sacred moment at a time. This is a place of advocacy, community, education, and healing. Here, we believe that birth and everything that surrounds it is sacred. Sit back, relax, and join us as we journey together. This is your sacred space to learn, to heal, and to connect. We are so glad you're here. And remember, every mother and every child deserves a sacred beginning.
But we didn't even, I'm older than you, obviously, but we didn't even get a video on birth in school. Mm-hmm. We got the boys go to one room, girls go to another room. Your body's about to go through some changes. And I'm like, my body already went through them.
Yeah.
So this is cute, but this ship has sailed.
Little late.
And they were literally making a uterus and fallopian tubes and ovaries out of pancake batter in the video.
That's
and I'm
disturbing.
Going, that wasn't how that worked out for me. I didn't get pancakes.
So I think we're already in the episode. Can I just introduce you and maybe we use some of that? Because that is amazing.
But with a midwife, she'll make you pancakes after you birth if you really want them.
Yes, that is so true. Welcome, everybody, to the Keep Birth Sacred podcast. I have Jen here with us today. We're just doing this because it's all good. Everything we're going to be talking about is good.
Absolutely.
Yeah. After, I will say that was probably my favorite thing after having my kids was being able to eat whatever I wanted in my bed.
Yep.
I think it was a bowl of Cheerios.
Really?
If I'm not mistaken. So glamorous. Just I really want Cheerios.
If you really want Cheerios, you can have Cheerios.
Mm-hmm. My one girlfriend would always get Olive Garden. She had to have Olive Garden.
I wanted pasta as soon as I birthed my baby.
Yeah.
Because the red sauce had made me sick for so long.
Oh, so you were give it to me.
Give me the red sauce.
So, guys, today we're here to talk about, what are we calling this, Jen? 5 things to consider as you're choosing a provider for your birth experience.
Yeah.
Where do we want to start? Do you want to talk about yourself a little bit? Do you want to talk about your background? Or do we just want to jump into the first thing?
Sure. So I am a home birth midwife, and I know Becca well. I can't say how I know Becca, but I know Becca well. There's a lot of people I know. People are like, oh, I heard that you worked with so-and-so. And I can say, yeah, I know so-and-so. I can't tell you how, but I know them.
Yeah. She knows me very well.
Exactly. I know them very, very, very well.
Very intimately.
Yes. I have been a nurse. June will be 25 years. So it's hard to be 29 and have been a nurse for 25.
It's bizarre how that works, isn't it?
Isn't it amazing? Kids get older. I stay the same. It's amazing. But I've also been a midwife for 12 years. So the story of me getting there is basically I went the medical model of care twice. And the second time was so rough that I found out that my daughter was coming 4 months after my son was born and said I can't go through that again and survive mentally. And then realized after walking through her pregnancy with a midwife and realizing people don't have to be treated the way I was treated. That's amazing. Yeah, why would anybody do this? And then I realized I should help people do this so that there's more choices and there's more options. So that's a little bit about me. I've got 3 kiddos, 20, 14, and 13. So it's all kinds of fun stages. Yeah.
How does that even happen?
You blink. You blink and it's happened. That first kiddo that carries all of your battle scars with you of learning how to be a parent. And then the other 2 who obviously have it easier. You figured a few things out until you realize I figured it out for that human. Now there's 2 different humans and you have to figure out how to do parenting with them. But yeah, so I have a home birth practice. I'm training a student because we need more midwives and have multiple assistants, but work in the greater Pittsburgh area.
So before we get you all the way in your midwife hat, do you mind sharing a little more detail about what you mean when you say oh, people don't have to be treated the way that I was treated with your first 2 births? Do you mind sharing a little bit about what you mean?
Yeah, to not sound dramatic, but I was bullied every appointment I had because on ultrasound with my second son, there were multiple markers that could lead to pointing in the direction of possible Down syndrome. And I had declined the initial NIPT, which is the non-invasive prenatal genetic testing that you can do at the beginning of pregnancy, because it didn't matter to me. It was my baby. I didn't want to have my pregnancy with a potential cloud over it of, well, this could be the case. You should be afraid. And regardless of what that testing would have shown, I would have continued with my pregnancy. I wasn't going to terminate. So every appointment, well, why are you not terminating? You realize your baby could have significant problems, and you're a single woman, and you are going to have a child that's going to have needs that are going to outlast you and your lifespan, and who's going to take care of that child then? And it was every appointment. Every appointment. And I was in an abusive relationship at the time. So it's like, oh, when I'm outside of this office, I'm being treated like garbage. Coming to this office, hoping to just be treated professionally. And I didn't even get professional. I got, you're a horrible human. What kind of person would do this? And it was shame. And I was like, I'm just trying to get through. Like, I want to get on the other side of meeting this baby, and we'll figure out all these things. And so when he was born and had 0 variations of normal, let's say, there was no Down syndrome. There was no cardiac defect. He had a diaphragm, he had kidneys, all of the things that they were so worried about. And this wasn't, 45 years ago. This was 14 years ago. It's not been that long. And I was like, you guys put me through hell.
Yeah.
With 0 regard to how you were affecting me on an emotional and psychological level. 0 regard. And then, obviously, nearly Irish twins, 13 and a half months apart. It was like I just mentally was at a place where, I knew I needed to move forward. I have 2 kids with a third on the way. I need to be in a better headspace if at all possible. I don't need to be bullied and harassed about my choices.
Yeah.
I don't care what they would have done. I didn't care what they thought. I wasn't making choices to make them happy.
Right.
And that's just such a strange place to be when, as a medical professional, as a nurse, you're realizing these people don't care at all. There's no care. I can get medical treatments.
Right.
And I can get evaluations, and I can get data, and I can get those things. But when it comes to somebody genuinely caring about me, caring about my baby, that's not happening there. And don't get me wrong, there are medical professionals out there who are wonderful.
Right.
Who do genuinely care. And thankfully, because not every home birth goes as planned, and thankfully, my clients, for the most part, encounter people with an abundance of compassion when they have to transfer into the hospital. And God has lined up exactly who you need when you need them there. I transferred one client, and the doctor or the resident, one of the 2, came in and held her hand and looked at her and said, I was born at home. We're going to take care of you. You're going to be fine.
I just got chills when you said that.
And I was like,
that's cool.
That's amazing. That's what she needed in that moment. And there are those amazing people who can set aside their own personal opinions to be a human with you. But there's a lot who have gotten hardened from the system. And it's sad.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that's not why those people went into medicine to begin with.
Right.
If you checked that little starry-eyed person who went to nursing school or went to medical school, they probably weren't doing it for the money. They probably weren't, you don't go in and learn about how to change a bedpan on somebody because you think you're going to be making bank. That's just not what you're doing. And you get hardened by the system.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. And it, as you were talking, sometimes I feel like when I get on my tangents with this, and I'm sure you can relate, sometimes people look at you like, this is an anomaly, you're being bullied, you are being dramatic, this isn't real, this isn't the majority. And I feel like I have to insert part of my story here because I actually forgot about it until you were just talking. And I don't know if you recall this, but with Arlen, I did choose to get several ultrasounds during my pregnancy. And I went through my, my family doctor or whatever. And I remember, which is so just this is so wild. I remember going in and asking because I wasn't seeing an OBGYN. And because it wasn't in the office, it had to be referred out. So this was kind of like an unconventional way of getting an ultrasound, right? Which was
Right.
like fine for me,
Right.
And
I
so
have
I
a
had to
lot of people
go.
for financial reasons who are like, I pay for insurance if the insurance will cover the ultrasound, and all I have to do is get a script from my family doc. Like, that's how I'm going to do it if I can.
That's what I'm going to do. So I had to go to this different place that I didn't normally go to. And they weren't seeing like tons of pregnant women. They were doing
Right.
ultrasounds for other reasons. And they gave me like one picture, one little thing. And I remember saying like, this is like my first pregnancy, my first baby. I'm like super excited to see like all of it, all
Right.
of
Like, I
the,
saw a hand and I saw a foot and I
yeah,
saw a
like,
face.
yeah, like where's the thing? Where's the thing? And it was such a process. And they're like, you have to go to medical records and it's on floor 4. And, you have to, so I'm like, elevator, talking to this person's on break, finally talk to somebody. And the woman literally gets like smart with me, is beside herself as to why I want these copies of these ultrasound photos. And she's like, nobody ever asks for photos of their liver, like ultrasound. And I was like, like standing there, like super pregnant, I'm like, I'm here to I'm requesting photos of my baby, like my baby.
Right.
Yeah, and I felt like gaslit first because I'm like, why are you making me feel crazy for asking for these? Like and even if it were my liver,
It's my liver.
it's
You've got
my
pictures of it.
medical record. It is my medical record. And if I want you to copy it 5,000 times, and if I want to come here every day and ask you for a picture of it,
Right.
like, you should give me that. I have the right to do that.
Right.
And I just remember this experience that, like, to your point about like caring and being human and being hardened, like, and that's why I'm calling this Keep Birth Sacred. We have gotten so far from the miracle that is birth that I couldn't even, that experience was totally tarnished for me. Something that my first baby, my first ultrasound experience, that should be happy, that should be exciting, it should
Right.
be gentle, it should be all of these things, right? And
Well, and if you think about like the reality, what if you found out your baby had passed and your baby was going to be born still, and you wanted those photos? You shouldn't have to explain that. You shouldn't have to go there and break down and fall apart and say, I'm
these are
not
all the
going to
reasons
get,
why.
this is
Yeah.
all I have for pictures of my baby. You shouldn't have to do that.
Right.
You shouldn't be
Right.
put through that. That woman
Right.
doesn't know.
Right.
And it's her job to work that window. So work that darn window the best you can.
Exactly.
You should be a ray of freaking sunshine.
Yeah.
Because nobody's coming and asking for medical records for good reasons.
Right. Exactly.
Like,
Exactly.
typically. Like,
Right.
what they see. It's not
Right.
just, oh, I want these memories to put in the baby book. And,
Right.
I just love it. And I get to do this one time for this one baby.
Right. Right.
You shouldn't have to explain or justify.
Yeah.
And I think like that's one of the big things with going what is considered in some ways an alternate route, which is actually the classic route. Women have been attending other women during their birthing time since the beginning of time.
Right.
Birth in a hospital, this hasn't been going on for very long. It really hasn't been going on for very long because I still have clients who, if their grandmother is older and lives in the South and she finds out they're having a home birth, she's calling and offering to pay for them to go to the hospital. Because in her mind, the only reason you'd be having a baby at home is because you can't afford to go to the hospital. So when that's still a mindset of people who are still alive today, shoot, I'm making everything jump.
Calm down, Jen. Woo! Getting everybody all hot and bothered, all worked up.
Right?
But you're right. So like to connect that dot, it's forever and ever and ever, this is how families came to be. And then with the onset of hospitals and medicalization and this status of if you can't afford it, if you are of this
Right. Social echelon.
exactly, then you have access to this. And it was this, I don't know if I want to say necessarily like rite of passage, but this status symbol of,
Right.
only particular people could afford it, could do it.
Well, and what did it really look like? Going in and being put into twilight sleep and being tied down and somebody got a baby out of your body and you woke up to, ta-da, you're a mother. Oh, that sounds super
Appealing. Yeah.
helpful.
Right.
Just what a delight.
So let's talk about how we were, kind of saying about justifying things and explaining things and whatever. I think that's a good segue to talk about what informed consent is and decision making, because regardless of the kind of birth you choose to have,
Right.
or where,
Right.
or maybe you've already had a child or two, and maybe this time you want to do it differently. Informed consent is something everybody needs to know, and not even in birth. I mean, just period.
Just as a consumer of healthcare.
Exactly. So
In
can we
any
talk about
capacity.
that?
Sure. So informed consent is something that as a healthcare provider, you're taught is something you have to get before you provide care to a client. So, for example, a woman who walks into the hospital in labor, she has to sign the consent form for care, never realizing that what she just signed basically says, you're consenting to whatever we feel is justified to do to you. Whether you like it, whether you want it, you signed consent. So if we feel this is necessary, we can just do it. But that really kind of perverts and distorts what informed consent was meant to be. So consent, when they say they signed the consent form, that means you signed the form giving consent. But when you're consenting to someone, like let's think about it anywhere outside of the hospital. When my clients come in for a prenatal appointment, they might have been in for 12 appointments up to this point. They lay down on the bed and I go to just measure their belly. Every time I ask if it's okay for me to touch them at that point. And there's people who go, you don't have to ask, like I'm here. And I'm like, yes, I do. Yes, I do, because it's your body. Nobody has permission to just touch you. Could you imagine being at the Walmart and someone's like, ooh, that sweater looks soft.
Yeah, right.
You would lose your ever-loving marbles.
Well, and there are people out there.
Oh boy, especially at the Walmart.
And especially when you're pregnant. It's like, it is just like a beacon that's saying, like, touch me, give me your opinion, comment on
Please
the way
tell
that
me
I
your
look.
birth trauma so that I can carry it into my birth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Please tell me if you think I'm having a boy or a girl, or what you think I should do with my career now that I'm becoming a mother.
And what you think of the names that I've picked out for said baby.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It's colorful out there. It's there's a lot of moms who kind of go into honey badger mode when somebody starts coming at them to touch them. It's fun. Like I get to hear the stories. It's wonderful.
Yeah,
Like good for
what
you.
are you?
Right. Right. Like I think that that's what should be printed on, like, the baby newborn carrier car seat combo thing.
Yeah.
I think that there should be like a honey badger printed on the cover that says, I'm a delight, but don't touch me.
Yeah, seriously. Stay
But
back.
yeah, like back to informed consent, you're giving permission for somebody to do something that involves you. And informed consent then means you're being given all the information. What the hospital really wants, especially when it comes to maternity care, is informed compliance. They don't want really informed consent, and they don't really want it too informed anyway, because A, they don't know the other options that are available. They only know what standard of care is. And that means it's just a cattle call. You show up, we do all the things for you that we do for everybody so that we're not considered to be discriminating against anyone. And then you move on. And then we get the next pregnant person. And we're going to make sure that they get all of the standard of care, and all the things that we did for the mom before is going to be the same as the mom after. And this is how we do things, because science.
Right.
But the science doesn't justify what they're doing. And the science, unless somebody, is going to make money off of red raspberry leaf tea, there's not that many studies on red raspberry leaf tea. And there's not really many studies on all these moms who get antibiotics for group B strep. What happens to their babies long term that they got IV antibiotics while the mom was in labor? How did that affect their health? Is anybody really studying that? Probably not, because there's not money to be made in it.
Right.
But there's money to be made in selling antibiotics.
Right.
So we can find all the reasons to justify that, because Big Pharma will pay for those studies, because that continues to boost their revenue. Finding out that those antibiotics are detrimental doesn't boost anybody's revenue. So there's not studies for that. So informed consent, from my standpoint, for somebody who's under my care and in my practice and with most traditional midwives, you're looking at coming in and saying, okay, hypothetically, you're 35 weeks along. Standard of care for Western medicine is that at this point, you're going to receive a Group B strep swab. We're going to test you for this particular bacteria. Why do they test for this particular bacteria? I go through and I explain why do they test for it. Then I explain what are the benefits of doing the test. Information, right? Like we have more information, we can work within that. Then yes, you could potentially benefit from IV antibiotics if you follow that Western line of thinking, or that you have this bacteria and here's some natural options for how to deal with having that bacteria. Is that bacteria really a problem, right? Like you could probably talk to 1,000 moms who will tell you, yeah, I got that and it didn't hurt, it didn't harm, I don't really know that it had any effect. And on occasion you're going to find a mom who says, yeah, my baby developed this infection and I was really glad I knew because at least I knew I had that bacteria. But then I can say to them, as an out-of-hospital midwife, you can decline this test. My feelings are not going to be hurt in any way, shape, or form. I'm not going to be mad at you. I'm not going to look down on you. It's fully within your right to say, no thanks, don't want a vaginal and rectal swab. Because who gets up on a Tuesday morning and says, let's go out and find somebody who will give me a vaginal and a rectal swab? Like that was on my top 10 list for this week. Checking a box. Nobody.
Right.
But I can say to them, okay, so let's hypothetically say you do go into the hospital. If you go into the hospital and we don't have this test on your records, they're going to assume that you're positive because you declined the test, which means they're going to want you to have these IV antibiotics even though we don't know whether you had that bacteria or not. So if we do the test and we can get a negative result on your chart, and for any reason you have to go to the hospital, this is a whole section of fights and arguments you just don't even have to have.
Right.
Ta-da!
And that you don't have to have while in active labor,
Right.
The boot, you know what I mean? Because
right. In a stressful situation. Well, and think about the reality of your birth plan has completely changed now too.
Right.
So it's already stressful for you. And then as soon as you get there, they're wanting to hook you up to an IV, give you IV antibiotics that you really felt very strongly against.
Right.
For no active infection, just for prevention of a problem in the best way that they see fit. And that's where things get a little bit, and even saying like, and if for any reason your baby has to transfer to the hospital, this is a whole section of fights and arguments you won't have to have. I've seen this be the difference between your baby staying at the hospital for a week and getting IV antibiotics for a week and your baby leaving after 32 hours because they were fine. And both babies were probably fine. All they did was monitor. The baby who stayed for a week didn't actively have an infection. But we didn't have this test, and then that justified their actions.
Right.
And so that's kind of where informed consent gets a little bit different, because if you went into a traditional OB office, they're going to say, oh, you're 35 weeks, we do the Group B strep swab. So while we do your internal check today, we're also going to swab you for this bacteria, because this is really, really important. And that's it. They didn't ask if you wanted that test.
Right.
They didn't ask if you had any questions. This is just what we do. Why would you not want what we do for everybody?
Yeah. And there's a tool that, and you might be like familiar with this, and
Brain.
those of you listening might be, but Brain. Yeah. So, for any decision that you're making, like ever in your life, because so often, we're kind of shuffling along, going after what everybody else is doing, but benefits, risks, alternatives, intuition, nothing. Did I get it? B-R?
Yeah.
All right. So you ask yourself that. And I was so grateful. I don't know if you taught me that, back then, 11 years ago, or what, but it was just like every little thing. I'm like, okay, what's the benefit of this? What's the risk of this? Is there some kind of alternative? Like, do we have to do it this way? Do we have to do this thing? What is my intuition telling? Like, how am I being guided? And I make a lot of decisions based off of what God's telling me to do and what I feel like he's put on me. And I'm thankful for that. And then it's like,
because how many times has that saved your butt?
Right. Or, hey, like, what if we just don't do nothing? Or can I postpone this? Does it have to be like right this second? And sometimes they make you feel like it has to be like right this second. And it's
well, they look at you immediately like you have three heads.
Yeah. Like, does it need to be right now? Can I, I'm interested in this. I don't know enough about it. I'd really like to come back maybe in the next appointment and we can revisit this.
Right.
But just the courage that it takes for somebody to be able to say that when you're sitting across from somebody who, like you said, like does this day in and day out, isn't respect. And that's the other thing, is it's a respect thing. It's like just total condescending nature. Just like, oh, you're just.
But I'm the medical professional. Why would you not just do what I said you should be doing?
Right.
And I would be lying if I said at any point in my nursing career that I didn't feel that way towards people. Mm-hmm. There were times that I was like, what do you mean you don't want to do this?
Right.
This will benefit you.
Right.
And they're like, yeah, but I don't want to. Mm-hmm. And I was like walking out of the room going like, you gotta be kidding me.
Yeah.
Why would they not, like, why are they being difficult about this?
Yeah.
Now I have to go write another note that says patient declined, blah, 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 blah. And like,
right.
When we could have just done this and had it done.
Yeah. So informed consent's huge, and for people listening, regardless of what you're doing, where you're at, not being afraid to ask questions, use this brain tool, calling, like, I know not everything you find on the internet is true, so we have to be careful with that too, right? Just being like, well, WebMD said this. But, I will say there's, to your point about there not being legitimate research around a lot of this stuff for the already mentioned reasons, there's still a lot of really good information out there. We can access a lot of really good and legitimate information, online from legitimate care providers, who have a similar view, that we do. So I feel like we could talk about informed consent all day, but what's the second thing that you would say?
Well, and back to the informed consent, I would also say, like, there are some people that when put in those situations, they're going to fawn. Their nervous system just starts to kind of shut down. Right. They're panicked. Take an advocate with you. Mm-hmm. Your advocate can be your husband, your partner, your spouse, your significant other. It can be your best friend. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it can be your mom. Point. I don't care who it is, but take somebody with you that ahead of time you get the game plan of, okay, this is what we're doing today. I need you to help me stay strong on this. I need you to help me. Like, this is the decision I have made about this thing. Mm-hmm. And then they're there to be that support to you, because you might have a doctor in the room, medical assistant in the room, nurse in the room, and they're all, but why? Da, 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 da. And you're like, okay, never mind. I don't want to have this fight in this argument. I'll just do whatever you want me to do.
Right.
And there's so many people out there that have trauma surrounding medical stuff that they're either going to freeze or fawn. Not everybody fights. So making sure that you kind of build your team of people around you that are going to be there to help support you in that moment.
Yeah, I love that. So is that one of your 5 things too, is finding an advocate?
Yeah,
just having somebody?
Kind of deciding, how do you want to be supported, encouraged, empowered, educated. That's huge when you're trying to find a care provider. There's a lot of things with my clients where I will say, okay, so next appointment, this is normally when we do X, Y, and Z. Do you want these things? Have you thought about these things? Do you have questions about these things? No, I never even thought about it. Didn't even know that was a thing. I haven't gone through the Western model of care, so I didn't know, like, maybe this is their first pregnancy. I didn't know that this was something to consider. Okay, I give them the quick rundown of all of the brain pieces. And sometimes it's a situation where they say, well, what's your intuition specific to me? And I can say, my gut's telling me this. I literally just did this yesterday with a client who risked out of care and now is potentially at a place where she may meet criteria for care again. And I was like, my intuition initially is telling me no. And she's like, I so appreciate you just being honest with me about that. She's like, I haven't had a chance to really check in with my intuition yet. I was like, do that. So it's just, if what your provider is doing is giving you enough information for you to consent to what they're suggesting you do, you haven't had informed consent. Informed consent means you know the reasons why you would want to say no, and you know the reasons why you would want to say yes.
Right.
And freely, without coercion, you're being given an opportunity to make that decision for yourself.
Yeah. You're confidently choosing, and this is something I've been saying for years, is like, we're not even given a chance to choose. And that's really what I want to be bringing with all of these interviews and information is, listen, do what you want. You have every right to make these decisions, but just know that you should be given a chance to choose. So if you're sitting in that, whether it's in active labor, if it's in a prenatal appointment, whatever, and you feel more like you're being commanded to do something, told to do something, and it's not in the heat of a moment in a life-saving situation, you know, or anything like that, you're allowed to ask a question. And it blows my mind that this kind of behavior is even outside of this. You know, we're just conditioned to just, oh, this is just what we do. Even with like school, you know, that, and we're not going to go there, Jen. We are not going to go there. But like, you know, school is another example, or how we work, you know, is another example.
You can go back, and anybody who wants to can go back and look and see when school became a community-based institution. Why was that funded? And how did we
Probably
get
so
there?
people could go work 9 to 5 somewhere.
It was during the Industrial Revolution to create workers. You knew how to stand in line. You knew how to take your turn. You showed up at the same time every day. You clocked out at the same time every day. And you went home. Like, it down the line. Be compliant. Do your things. Be compliant. If you're not compliant, you don't fit in here.
Which is also why I think for people who do press against the edges of compliance, you know, or go outside of that box, it feels the way it does. Like if you're sitting in these appointments, or if you're sitting at a family function and somebody's judging you for your birth choices or parenting choices or school choices or whatever, the reason you feel rattled and unsettled sometimes, or like you have something to defend, is because like you are breaking that societal norm. And I've just gotten to the point that I'm pretty familiar, that's like where I play mostly. I've just gotten familiar with, like, chances are I'm going to rattle somebody. Chances are somebody's not going to like what I have to say. But I know that I could be, for every time I don't, which is why I'm even, you know, I don't want to say nervous, but I'm trying to be very bold with this, with this project in a way that I haven't been before. And I'm still like, you know, a little reserved, just catching myself, you know, but I'm like, for every time I don't say something, it could be a disservice to the one person who needs to hear it.
Yeah.
And
who needed to hear it.
Yeah. And if one person didn't tell me about the documentary, The Business of Being Born, 11 years ago, my situation would have been so different. I would have never met you. I would have never had the experiences that I did. And I mean, that was like the gateway drug to the way that I ended up making all of these other decisions in my life. I mean, really. And that person did not have to send me that Facebook message that day and say, you know, you really should watch this documentary. And when somebody's going out of their way to tell you something, or if you're listening to this and you're like, you know, my intuition's feeling a little warm and fuzzy about this Jen lady and this midwife stuff. You know, I really do believe that that's a sign that you should do your due diligence and look into this a little more. What's it going to hurt to have a conversation or to do a Google search? You know, don't not see it through and then wonder on the other side of an experience where you feel unfulfilled, whether or not you should have done it differently, you know? At least you deserve to seek out all of your options and to choose things. And even if that care provider is like, no, we can't do that. Well, guess what? I went to 6 different OBs in my first 6 months of pregnancy because I was like, not working for me, not working for me.
Don't realize that, like, you're hiring someone to provide you a service.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
You wouldn't be okay taking your car in to get an oil change and them saying, so while you were here, we noticed you needed new tires. And the standard is that whenever you put the coin in the tire, the thingy comes. I don't get it. Somebody else helps me with that stuff. But they're like, that's the standard. And we checked it. And so you just needed new tires.
We just tread.
That thing. Yeah. So I get in, I turn on the car, it goes. That's what works for me.
Yeah.
But like, you went in to get your oil changed. It was supposed to be $39.99.
Yeah.
And you come back and they're like, well, we noticed you needed new tires. We thought so.
Yeah.
So we put new tires on your car.
Yeah.
And because we put new tires on the car, we did give you an alignment.
Yeah. When
And
we did the alignment, we noticed that we accidentally did this thing that we had to fix. So we went in and we
right,
fixed that. Hope that's okay. There were 5 ways to fix it, but we just chose the way that we normally fix it, the way that we've
right,
been fixing it. Great analogy, metaphor, analogy, whatever.
right. And and by the way, here's your bill for $1,100.
Yeah,
You're not going to pay that bill and
right,
be like, "Thank you so much. You saved
right.
the day." But that's what everybody does with healthcare.
Yeah,
They just take whatever they're given and they pay the bill. And I know a lot of people think, well, I have insurance, they pay the bills. You pay for the insurance to be the mediator between you and the healthcare provider and to get things paid. You're paying for that, even if you're not directly paying the provider. And you should be able to pick and choose what you're paying. You wouldn't go to a restaurant and order your spaghetti with red sauce and be served oysters and say, "Oh, well, thank you."
yeah, this is fabulous.
Right. Because everybody who comes in who has blonde hair and blue eyes gets oysters. That wouldn't be okay with you. So if you show up somewhere and you happen to have a baby in your body and they decide this is what we do to you and you don't get to say so, like, what? That shouldn't be, you should not be paying someone to have to argue with them. No is a complete sentence. If you say no, that means no. And if somebody doesn't respect your no, next, do you have to date providers on some level? Oh, yeah. Yeah, go try them out. Call on the phone and just start asking some questions and see how you're treated. You'll know right away whether or not people would respect the fact that you might want something a little bit different. But we can't do something different for you and not do different for everybody because that's discrimination.
Right. And understanding that sometimes, because how do I want to say this? I guess I kind of understood the game, thankfully, because of this documentary, which I'll link down here in the notes, The Business of Being Born. I think they came out with some like part 2s and maybe additional videos. And,
Yeah.
And then that led me to Ina May Gaskin and spiritual midwifery. And
You went down the rabbit hole.
I'm all the way down the rabbit hole, and I'm like,
You came to the
wow.
dark side where we have cookies.
Yes, cookies and Cheerios and hot showers and
Yeah.
like
And somebody who loves you and cares about you and wants what you want.
just like doing it. So, I was on the fence, right? And I'm like, okay, so I understand that this is, these are 2 different worlds. And I really do have to choose one or the other. Like I really can't. It's hard to have both. And there's so many decisions that go into it because here I am employed. I have a really great insurance package. I have all of this stuff that's just like, we say free, right? Because it's like, oh, our insurance pays for it, like you just said. I have access to all of these care providers and, And then I have the ability to have a home birth, but everything has to be paid now out of pocket because insurance, at the time.
It's crooked.
Yeah, and I don't know how things have changed in the past 11 years, but, at the time it's like, okay, got to pay this out of pocket. Anything that I'm doing that I maybe can't get it written a certain way, ultrasound, if I happen to need some kind of medication, whatever. This is all now out of pocket. So now this is a financial decision and it's like, oh my God, like this is my baby, kind of like a big deal, so before I met you, I was doing my due diligence and compromising is what I was doing. And I'm sharing this because I know other people out there are doing this too. And I would go to these providers and schedule, I literally would ask them for like a kind of like a discovery session. They're like, you mean your first appointment? And I'm like, no. I want to just come in and meet with one of, because, normally they were, I don't know how they call it.
I'd like to interview the provider.
Right. Like, and at each practice, you might have 4 or 5 and then they're like rotating. And I didn't like that either, not knowing that I couldn't establish a relationship. I'd have to like meet all 6 of these people and then it's just roll of the dice, like whoever's there, didn't like that. But, I'm just asking questions like, it's really important to me that I do not wear a hospital gown. You cool with that? It was like I was asking them, for something just like totally off the wall. I'm like, if I could not wear the hospital gown, if I could eat during my labor, if I could have, wireless monitoring and be up and around. And at the time, there weren't like peanut balls and exercise balls really in hospitals like they are now. If I can bring this ball in with me,
so
I want to make sure I have a doula.
Pause you for a quick second. In what other situation would you be asking permission
I know.
to wear whatever the fuck you wanted?
I know.
To be able to eat?
And to be told no. And
Right.
listen,
Would I be
anyone,
allowed?
right.
Like they're your parent.
And before anyone like comes for us and is like, well, here's all the reasons why, we know all the reasons, we know the contingencies. I get why these things are in place. But if I am an otherwise healthy mother with a healthy pregnancy and no indications that I'm going to be needing any of these things, that all of this stuff was put into place for the benefit of staff usually, and
Right.
correct me if I'm speaking out of turn here.
Well, like the eating thing.
Right.
Yeah, you're considered healthy, Becca, but we don't know that you're going to stay healthy.
Right.
So because you're walking in our doors to birth your baby, you have a 1 in 3 chance of having a surgical birth.
Exactly.
Because of the things we're going to do to you, but they don't acknowledge that end of it.
Because of the
But because you're
intervention.
simply walking in our doors, we know statistically you have a 1 in 3 chance of a surgical birth. And if your surgical birth is emergent, meaning you're not going to be awake for it and we need to get your baby out and get your baby out now, which is an even smaller ratio than the 1 in 3. You can't have eaten because you run the risk of aspirating and the food
Violent.
washing up from your stomach and going into your lungs while you're in surgery, because we're relaxing those muscles and we're putting you in positions where your stomach contents could wash up and go into your lungs. And then you end up with pneumonia. And then you'll blame us, but it was really your fault because you wanted to eat. But instead of somebody saying, well, you have the choice to eat, that's always your choice, but here's the risk.
The risk.
It's, no, you don't have permission. Who are you
And
to tell me I
so-
can or can't eat?
And so, as I'm going through these literally 6 different, and can we talk about how difficult it is anyway? And this is why people give up, because now you're calling your insurance, you're finding who's in network, you're having to make an appointment, you're waiting 3 weeks, you're waiting 4 weeks, you can't get on the schedule, you're here and you're there. And then you're like, well, this is 40 minutes from my house and the nearest hospital's here. And after I had my children, our local hospital, labor and delivery, just totally like out of here. It's actually back now, but that was causing all of these, all of the people from this county basically to have to now go to here and there. So location's an issue, and everyone's, you're freaking out, and then you're having a baby and you don't know if you're doing all of these things. And really all I was looking for was somebody who had like a gentle temperament, like somebody who was like a little like reasonable, who like made it make sense to me. Like I'm just like praying. I'm like, just one of you make it make sense. Just one of you make it make sense. Just give me something. Just be like, you know what? You can't eat. We're going to give you ice chips, but I'm going to let you wear what you want to wear. It's like I'm going to raise you. It's like a game, it's like, I'm going to give you, I'm going to give you the clothes.
Condition you so much, Becca, that you're still saying, we're going to let you.
Right. Exactly.
In your brain, you're still in a place psychologically that they put you,
right,
where
where
you
I'm
say,
like, yes,
so
I get
you're
to wear my
gonna
own
let
clothes.
me?
Yeah.
What?
I know.
What?
I know.
Like,
so then, and I tell this story, if you guys have listened to the previous episodes, the intro episodes, I tell this story, and Jen, you probably haven't listened to it yet because I just posted them, but I tell this story about this lovely day that came along where I met this woman named Jen, who, out of all of those care providers, now mind you too, you have somebody coming in, checking your blood pressure, like I'm in front of a million different people, and
get on the scale.
Get on the scale. You were the first person to acknowledge me, to acknowledge Nate, their dad, and then to say, hi, baby. Can I say hi to your baby? And I don't know if you remember this, but you probably do it because it's just who you are. But I remember you like getting down and just like acknowledging that there was a third person in the room, that wasn't like an organ, that wasn't like a liver, like the other lady said. And I'm just like, wow, whoa.
I didn't say hi to your placenta. I mean, that organ was
Why didn't you say hi to my placenta, Jen? But, and I'm just like, wow, everything about this is just like already so.
This is okay.
Like, this is like, I feel safe. I feel like, oh, none of those other, it's just, not, and listen, like you said, there are some amazing people out there. I'm not saying this is
Right.
how it is 100%
Right.
of the time, you know.
It's not. Yeah.
It's not, but
But
more
sadly,
times
those
than
people are the
not.
exception, not the rule.
And
And
I
it's all
think,
about mitigating liability. Like, I've worked in it. I know. You do what you have to do to make sure you don't get sued, which does involve gaslighting people. Thank goodness you were here, sweetheart. We were able to save you and your baby. You caused the problem in the first place that put them at risk. You don't go back that extra step and realize your actions had cause and effect.
and just for anyone listening who's like, that's a little sideways, I already have
Talk to people.
and
Talk to other people.
I have at least at the time of our recording right now 24 people on my calendar already who are wanting to share their wins in
Yeah.
their birth experiences, but also some of them, you know, who have never shared their traumatic birth stories who want to, because when we talk about this more, when women share more, when they're given a space
Right.
to share more and this be normalized, and you know, they're probably not going to be posted statistics anywhere about these are all the women that are traumatized. Do you
Right.
know what I'm saying?
Right.
But it's like when we start talking about it more and we're aware of it more, then we're giving people the option and the resources to be able to be like, oh, well, I heard about this potential thing that could happen. What are the chances that this could happen to me if you do this? You
Right.
know, we're putting the information in the hands of the families who need it. So when they go
Right.
in for these appointments, they at least have some semblance of what questions to ask, you know, or experiences, you know, to draw from. And it's just like, oh, it's so frustrating.
It is. It is.
So
And
frustrating.
it's so hard to hear all of the stories of everybody who comes in through my practice who's like, yeah, so this happened and that happened and and that's how I ended up here. It's wonderful when I have someone who's like, yeah, you know, my mom home birthed, and so this is why I'm going to home birth, and I have friends who have home birthed, and this just resonates with me. And I'm like, it's amazing. You have no trauma to carry, to process, to go. Like, you don't have to do all of this really hard work to undo what's already been done to you.
Yeah. And I want to talk about that stigma for a second, because I think that people generally have this idea that like everyone who has a home birth is like some hippy dippy,
Right?
you know, it's like they came from home birthing parents. It was just like they were birthed at home around like a campfire with like deer in the yard and whatever. And it's just
Like a Snow White situation.
yeah, it's just like, you know, this is just like what these people do. But that's not the case. And I'm curious, can you talk about what you saw? I would imagine that you saw some heightened interest around COVID.
Oh my
for
goodness,
home birth.
yes. Yeah, like at this point, we don't have enough midwives in the area to care for all the people who want to have a home birth and would qualify.
And you're driving hours to see
Yes.
your people, just to be clear, you know, for
Yes.
people who don't
Yeah,
know
for
your
their birthing
territory.
time. I mean, I am driving often 2 hours one direction for a birth because, like you were saying, in your area, all the smaller town hospitals can't afford to stay open because of the liability insurance. It's really like it's a huge problem. Because what ends up happening is they have to staff that unit 24/7, whether or not there's a mom there in labor or not. They then have to pay liability insurance. And you're not just staffing nurses, you have to have nurses, secretaries, medical assistants, nurse anesthetists, physicians. And they're not getting enough money from doing the births through the insurance company because the insurance companies are so crooked that you don't know from one day to the next what they're going to pay and what they won't pay. And so then it's just not cost effective to keep the unit open anymore. So they close them. So I have people who call and say, like, look, by the time I recognize I'm in labor, there's not a snowball's chance in Hades that you're going to make it here in time for this baby to arrive. But if you can talk us through it on the phone and you can prep us for it,
Sound familiar?
we'll be okay. And I'm like, you understand the risk that you're taking, that nobody's going to be there with you. And they're like, okay, so let's weigh this risk. I understand what you're saying and we're not arguing with you. But is it safer for us to have you en route and you on the phone? Or is it safer for it to be February, knowing -14 degrees outside and my wife's having a baby in the car? Touche. Like, it is what it is. Like,
I mean, these are real life things. We're not
oh my
all in
goodness.
downtown, metropolis area where,
Right.
we have these big, massive hospitals. And even so, when you do your brain tool and you look at the benefits and risks, just like FYI, do a Google search and find out the surgical birth rates and the transfer rates of these places. And then,
Right.
that's even a legitimate question. It's like, like almost 40% of these births are ending in a C-section in this particular hospital. Do I want to do that? Like, do I want to, and unnecessary, you have to obviously look at that too.
Right. And like part of informed consent, when they say, here, we're going to have you consent to your surgical birth. We need you to sign here, sign here. Here's your risks. You can have a risk of infection. You can have a risk of bleeding. But like sign at the dotted line. They don't add in the statistic there that one out of every 200 moms who has a surgical birth, she becomes addicted to opiates.
And what does that do for your baby?
What does that do for you? What does it do for your family? Like, I have a risk of addiction because of the surgical birth. They don't tell you that. That's not information they think you need.
And I know we're jumping around. I'm just trying to be in the mind of a listener. There's nothing, please hear our heart when we're talking about this. There's nothing wrong with appropriate medical intervention. And thank God for it when we need it. But we have to acknowledge.
I'm not anti-hospital. I'm thankful for what they have when we need it.
Yes.
But it's a when we need it situation. Because when we don't, one out of every 3 women shouldn't think that they're so broken that they can't birth.
Right.
1 out of every 3 women didn't die before in childbirth.
Right. And looking up those infant and maternal mortality rates will sober anyone real quick when you compare what's happening in the United States to the rest of the world. I mean,
exactly.
if you're a person who's making decisions based off of statistics, just look that one up. But Jen, can you talk about, because some people would probably be like, well, I'm just going to get scheduled for my induction. I know when baby's coming, probably not aware that an induction also increases that chance of a cesarean section, yada, yada. But why, from a maternal biological standpoint, why do we want to aim for a natural vaginal birth? There's many reasons, right? But like, what are some of the most important reasons for mom or for baby that the mom and baby have the best chances of XYZ if this happens? Or what are all the benefits of a natural vaginal birth mothers can cling to be like, no, this is why I want to do this. This is why I want to do this.
Well, I mean, you have the psychological risks, you have the physical risks. Psychologically, it completely has this disconnect between you and your baby. Does it mean it can't be fixed? No, it doesn't. But you're disrupting the biological process. And if you can't come on the other side of it and say, yes, that was necessary. Do I have clients who it's necessary that they have a surgical birth? Yes. I absolutely,
100%.
Absolutely have had multiple clients where a surgical birth was what was necessary. But there's psychological effects to you and to the baby. There's physical effects to you and to the baby. And some of those things you can't just undo. It's major abdominal surgery. It's treated as though, we'll just take you in, we'll get your baby out, everything's going to be great.
Right.
That's not always the case. And they're also going to take your baby. And because now you can't breastfeed your baby, that's been disrupted. And so when you start going down the line of all of these things that I really wanted and were important to me are gone, and I can't get them back. I don't get a redo. There's no redo on birth. You can have another child and they have their birth.
Right.
But you can't redo that birth. So it's really a matter of having care providers that you can trust enough that you can get on the other side of it and go, yes, that was necessary. And I have peace about it.
Right.
Because it was necessary. Even though it wasn't what I wanted, I have peace because it was what was needed.
Right.
So there's the difference between wanted and needed, and whether or not you trust the person that you're talking to as genuinely, like, knowing you, knowing your baby, knowing what's important to you, to be able to say, yes, this is okay. And I can just, like, I saw these different things happen. This was needed. That's where I see a lot of problems where people are struggling after a birth.
I could not agree more. And the disruption with connecting.
Yes. the bonding.
The bonding, I've heard that from more moms than I care to. Just
And they're ashamed of it. And it breaks
right.
my heart to see them be ashamed of a
And then it's
struggle.
not talked about
Right.
because they're ashamed. And just realizing that every decision you make that, and that's a good way of putting it, every decision that is made, maybe you don't make, but every decision that is made to disrupt that natural process is a domino effect. It has multiple consequences. You know,
Right.
it's not just like we're going to induce. That's a big statement. You know, we're going
Right.
to break your waters. We're going to use some Pitocin. We're going to take the baby for a
Right.
little bit. We're going to ask dad to step out. We're going to whatever, right? Like
Right.
these all have physical, emotional, spiritual consequences
Every aspect of your life will be affected by those choices and decisions.
by those choices and decisions. And even though they're relayed to you like, oh yeah, we're just going to do this thing, it is so much bigger than that. And
Exactly.
man, I just cannot say that enough.
Right.
I just cannot say that enough. And hopefully these women who share their birth stories, you know, their stories will help kind of like ring that bell over and over for us to hear, because we just need to be stronger and more confident as a collective voice, I think, to be making these change. You know, things are only going to change when we start demanding that they change.
Right.
You know, and not everybody, let's face it, you know, not everybody has access to or wants to have a home birth, and that's okay, or has the ability to have a home birth.
Right.
But ultimately for me, when, you know, after I did have my kids at home, there was a lot of, oh, well, we can't all be like you, Becca. We don't have that money, and we're not all that lucky.
Right.
Like, listen here. I felt like and I say this, I felt like I was forced to have a home birth. Okay. And somebody might be like, that's a weird perspective. But if I would have, you don't think that in this day and age, an average mother would want to have access to a medical facility if and when she would need it? Like, you don't
Right.
think that I wanted that for me and my family and my baby? But the problem was every time I was going into these places, I was being told what I could and couldn't do. And I had to make a decision, a very, very hard decision, and have a
Right.
lot of trust and faith in God and a lot of trust and
Right.
faith in you know,
Right.
to know that we were making the best choice. But let me tell you, if I was able to birth the way that I wanted to with you in a hospital, that would have been ideal for me.
Right.
I don't even care if it was the stalest hospital room you ever showed me.
Right.
If I was able to go in and out of that hospital so I could walk around outside in the fresh air and in the sun and wear my own clothes and eat and do all of these things with you next to me and have my baby in water the way that I wanted
Right.
to and da-da-da-da-da and take a shower and all this stuff, I would have been more than happy to have my insurance company bill that and have that experience and do it there.
Right.
But that's not how this works.
It's not even available.
Not available.
It's not available. And why? Because there's a legal team that works for the hospital, and they tell everyone what they can and can't do. And depending on how the laws are in your state, if that midwife is regulated, the state tells her what she can and can't do. Mm-hmm. And what she has to have to even be able to practice.
Which is probably why some midwives who, for very long amounts of time, because I've seen this trend, you know, have worked for hospitals, started early retirements or leaving, or, you know
Right.
what
Well,
I mean?
how do
Just
you
like,
watch the trauma over and over and over again? Again, knowing that's not why you went to school to be a midwife.
right.
It was not to treat people this way, not to have these outcomes, not to have 1 out of every 3 moms have a surgical birth. Mm-hmm. It's not why you did this. Mm-hmm. How long do you keep doing that?
Right.
That trauma doesn't start to affect you.
Right.
But back to like the original question of like, what are things that are important to consider? Does your birth provider really support you in your decisions? You have a best friend. They support you. Mm-hmm. What does that support feel like? What does it look like? If you're not able to pay someone to provide you a service and give you support for the choices and decisions that you make, there's a problem.
Right.
There's not respect. There's not empowerment of, I'm going to do this. Mm-hmm. These are the choices and the decisions that I made. And I know things might go awry somewhere in there.
Right.
There's parts of this I can't control. Because going into having a home birth because you want to control everything is also not a great way to go into birth either.
Yeah.
And like we see that as well. But like the whole purpose of it is to get on the other side and level up. But with healthcare being the way that healthcare is now, women are not even coming out on the other side of childbirth at the same level they went in.
Right.
They're being down leveled. And now they're nervous and they're anxious and they question all of their choices and decisions, which we do as mothers anyway. But you're not leveling up to, I'm a mom. I'm this baby's mom. I got this. Whatever comes at us, together we've got this. That's a problem. These, like, the amount of people who tell me about providers, usually male, shoving their hands inside their vagina without ever asking permission or consent is mind-blowing. Mind-blowing. There's no consideration to the fact that for most of my clients, they're married. You made a commitment before God and each other that your bodies were for each other and for each other alone. And now temporarily, you're asking somebody else to be a part of that equation, to assist you and respect the space that you're giving them when you made a commitment between the two of you and God, that nobody else was going to be in this marriage bed. And you're looking at me saying, I trust you to step in here and touch my wife in a way, or touch me in a way that only my husband is supposed to do. And I feel safe letting you do that. Medicalized care providers don't even consider that. It's just a vagina. Why would you care if I put my hand in there?
And that's part of this keeping this whole birth experience sacred. Like
Right.
that's like we're so far away from even like thinking that. And even some people listening to this will be like, I never even thought about that. It's just like what we do when we go in there, you know?
Right.
Like, but it's not how it's how it's been in our lifetime, but
Right.
this is not the way that things have been, and it's not the way to do it to get the best outcome.
Right. Not to come on the other side of it and be mentally healthy and well. Why do we have such a mental health care crisis right now?
Well, yeah.
What are you doing to 50% of the population when they have a child? They're destroying women. And then coming on the other side going, we just don't know why we have all these postpartum mood problems.
Yeah. How about I give you like 1,000 reasons why?
Right.
Like,
Right.
and this is what's so getting into the more spiritual side. I'm like, it's such deception, because how can we not see? How can we not have eyes to see and ears to hear that this is a problem? Something that a woman's body is literally built for. You know,
Right.
we tell people
It's a natural
that they
biological
can be
process. Nobody is running their dogs and cats to the vet when they're having kittens or puppies.
right.
Everyone they just do it. Look at that.
Like imagine that, right? And it's like
Right.
you tell women, and it's such a no wonder we have the world that we do today. Like we have such a twisted perspective that we tell people they can literally be anything. We tell women they can be anything except mothers. It's like, you can run this marathon, you can become president, you can have this multi-million-dollar business, you can da. But I'm not sure. I don't know if you
Right.
are, like, if I'm not really sure if you can do this. Not really sure if you can do this. And then you're like, man, I don't know if I can do this. I'm a boss over here. I'm a boss over here. I'm a boss over here.
Right.
That's like a whole other conversation. Then you get thrown into your masculine energy, you know, and you're like,
Exactly.
and you're like, oh my gosh, maybe I can't do this. Maybe
Right.
I can't do this. So then you're like, well, what do I need to do? And you're like, I need to do this. I need to do this. But I heard this thing and I'll get induced. I'll do this. I'll do that. And then you're defeated and you're depressed and you're all the way in your masculine and you're like, but I got to get back to work. And then you're wondering why your husband's not looking at you the same. And you're wondering why your marriage is ending up in divorce and why you can't handle all the things, because like no one ever just said, let's keep this experience sacred for you and this baby. Like you said, it happens once. You get one shot at this. One shot at this. Let's give these women a few months.
Where you have to hire someone to protect you at the hospital.
Right. Like, what are we doing?
Right.
How do we have information about, and I say this all the time, how do you know what the Kardashians are doing and you don't know how your body works? I love you when I say this, people. I love you. Hear my heart. But like, how are you justifying taking all this time reading scary mommy blogs about things that don't matter, or making sure you're saving up enough money to buy like the perfect crib that your baby, I'm sorry, doesn't care about, but you're not thinking to yourself, wonder how my body works. Wonder what this drug does. I wonder what would happen if I quit doing this and started doing this. maybe I can breastfeed. Maybe I shouldn't believe
You
them.
mean my nutrition matters while I'm pregnant?
Right.
How do I find more information on that?
Right. And I want people to be like, go to that Keep Birth Sacred podcast. Those people are talking about everything over there.
Right. Well, and it's just like, think about the amount of time, money, and effort that people put into their wedding.
Oh gosh, tell me about it.
But do they put a fraction of that into their birth?
Or even like all the trappings of birth, right? The nursery,
Right.
buying a new vehicle, the parties that we're having, right? Like leading up to that. But it's like, to know what happens between conception and delivery, I mean, you really have to be willing to learn.
Right. Right. And we have to teach our daughters.
Right. And that's exactly why I'm here doing this.
Right. Our daughters deserve to know.
I don't want my kids getting to the point that if they choose to have families one day, you know, it would be just so great if this stuff was a little more normalized.
Right.
You
right.
know,
it has to be. Like, you know, my daughter starts her cycle on a Sunday morning, the week she turns 13. And she comes to me and she's like, so I started. And I was like, oh, you did. I was like, how are you? Are you okay? Like, what do you need? And she's like, I don't need anything. I'm fine. And she's like, I just thought you should know. And I was like, well, thanks. Can we have a party?
Let me get you a menstrual cup.
I said, well, sweetheart, like, we could just have a party and only you and I know what's going on. Yeah. And we'll make all the food red. And we can giggle at everybody else who doesn't know what's going on.
Oh my gosh,
she's like, I would die. Don't you dare. Yeah. And I said, okay.
I love it.
But there was zero fear.
Yeah, it wasn't scary. It wasn't a surprise.
Right.
Yeah.
And like, my intuition got keyed up probably 3 weeks before. And I was like, you don't have supplies. I need to talk to you because you go to your dad's hardware, or to my dad's hardware store, your grandfather's store. You work 2 days a week with your grandfather and another guy. That's not going to work well if this starts while you're there.
Right, right.
I'm like, you need to start keeping a bag with you. These are the things that you have to keep in your bag. Do you know how to use these things? Like, do you have any questions? But like, I realize she is the exception. The majority of girls are not getting that conversation. That's horrifying.
Which is like a whole other...
But like, we can't change it, and we can't keep it sacred if we're not changing it generationally.
And we have to.
And we have to. It has to be normal. Our girls have to see us in the bathroom tending to ourselves on our cycle. Hey, this is how your body cleans itself. If you cut your arm, your body cleans it by bleeding. Your body cleans itself once a month by bleeding. But like, you can't have it just be like, hey, this is a really cool part of your life. This means you're getting ready to be at the place where your body's preparing for you to be a mom.
Yeah.
Like, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
I think it deserves
realizing
a party,
the root. Realizing that like the root of all of that shame and dirtiness or taboo, you know, that comes from somewhere. We're not going to go there right now because we need to be wrapping it up, but like, we need to not be so disconnected from history and from biology. Yeah. To realize that like, these things this all comes from somewhere. And the only way we change what our girls, you know, what our children get to experience, or what you, for your next birth or your first birth, if you're listening and you're thinking about conceiving, you're thinking about this, like, you are the ideal person. Like, this is great. I wish that I would have known. I started finding things out in my like 2nd month of pregnancy, you know?
Exactly.
But it's like, man, so I had to take the crash course and learn it real quick, you know, but it's like, since then, it's just, man, this is normal. What you're feeling is normal. If you're in your appointments and you're agitated and irritated and you're sitting there like,
or fearful.
Yeah, you're scared because you're like, this doesn't seem right. Like, this test that they want to do, or the way that they want to, like, this doesn't seem...
You can say no.
So...
And still be a really good mom.
And still be an awesome mom. Yeah. So I don't know what our 5 things were. I'm sure we went through them.
We had a lot of things.
Is there anything else that you want to leave the listeners with before we wrap up?
To be continued.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Part 2. Okay. Come back for more. We're going to schedule another one.
We'll do it in person next time. That'll be so much better.
That would be so fun.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Jen.
You're welcome.
Always.
Love you.
Always a pleasure. Thank you, guys. We'll see you in the next episode. Bye.
Bye.